Hi, everybody. Scott Holstein with Computrols here. I'm the Director of Marketing and Business Development. Thank you all for attending our webinar today. As you probably already know, Computrols is a manufacturer of building automation systems. We control HVAC, lighting, access, and fire alarm systems, typically in commercial real estate, hospitals, data centers, and higher education facilities. What we're best known for really is our ability to integrate to both open and proprietary third-party systems, and that's going to be a big theme today in our webinar. Some of the more prominent customers of Computrols throughout the country include the Statue of Liberty, Williams Tower, Chase Tower, Harrah's Hotel and Casino, and the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. We're going to do our best to get through all of this content in about 30 minutes or so today, so we're not taking up too much of your time. We are going to try to leave enough time for questions at the end. To ask a question, all you need to do is click on the comment bubble up at the top. You'll see one of the attendees is named Questions Ask Here. You'll also see Computrols Presenter. You can click on either of those to ask your question. And then we're going to answer as many as we can at the end, and if we don't get to them all, we will certainly be sending them out as emails at the end of the presentation here. We'll also be sending a PDF version of this presentation deck. Today, I'm joined by our CEO, Drew Meir. Drew happens to be one of our foremost experts on our ability to integrate to existing Siemens systems, again, both open and proprietary. We're going to be focusing today on Siemens Insight system, as Insight is being obsoleted and customers are being pushed towards Desigo. What we're seeing in this process is something that's not all that uncommon in the building automation industry. So planned obsolescence is something that you see in consumer devices as well as large-scale commercial devices like building automation systems. And the big, planned obsolescence is this big, complicated word, but basically what it means is, when a company obsoletes, essentially stops supporting a particular technology in order to generate new business. So that's something as an industry, building automation, the industry itself has been guilty of far too often, and that was one of the reasons why Computrols was built the way that it was. But in terms of building automation systems, you typically see systems that have a life cycle of about 10 years. You'll see a couple of sources there that kind of reiterate that. But as we get into today's webinar, we just want to let you know the content of this webinar it comes from our personal industry experience and content that we readily found on the internet. So it's not like we have some in here. But without further ado, I'm going to hand the reins over to Drew here to get started on our webinar.
Thank you for the introduction, Scott, and certainly thank you for everybody joining us here today. I'm going to go ahead and dive right in. I have two primary goals for today's webinar. The first being to educate Insight users on what they can expect as a part of a migration from Insight to Desigo. And as Scott mentioned, the information being presented today comes from just industry experience, speaking with industry colleagues, experts in the industry, and then just online research as well. And goal number two for me is going to be educating the audience on Computrols' history, our business practices, and our core competencies as a company. So without further ado, we'll dive right in. First and foremost, when talking about a migration from Insight to Desigo, timeline is the subject that comes up first and foremost. The data that you see shared on my screen here is pulled directly from a document published on the Siemens website, and it pretty much details the product life cycle as Scott had mentioned. And on this particular example, it's 3 stages: active support, extended support, and retired. So you'll see what each of those means at the top, and then detailed at the bottom. You'll see that the latest revision of the Insight software platform is revision 3.15, and that is set to go into the retirement phase February of 2022, and then you can see when the platform will be sunsetted for earlier revisions as well as a part of this map that is provided here. As detailed on the document, retirement means that you will have no new features. There'll be no new releases, essentially no support unless it is paid at an hourly rate. So that's what you can expect in terms of the timeline for the migration and the obsolescence of the platform. As a part of a Insight to Desigo migration, what can you expect? I'm going to go into a little bit of detail on each of these highlighted items. First and foremost, this is not a small undertaking. This is a major upgrade, major migration. It's going to have a steep learning curve. The user experience, as you know it in Insight, is going to change dramatically when you migrate to the Desigo platform. Thinking about it, I equate it to a migration period in time, which I can relate to, is Windows when they migrated from XP to Windows 7. I recall being exceptionally frustrated when they removed the start button because it was a user experience change, something that I functioned with, used on a regular basis, and it changed. It was no longer there. I had to relearn, and it was a bit of a steep learning curve. Another example might be the migration from DOS to Windows in the 90s, so late 80s, early 90s. That migration was major as well. So expect something similar, again, a completely new user experience, user interface to be learned. As a part of the migration, one of the things that you can expect to not migrate over is your trend data. So trend data from Insight will not migrate over to the Desigo platform as I understand it. I do understand that the data will be accessible through some other program or a similar machine. You may be able to go back and look at it. However, it will not migrate over from Insight to Desigo. One of the major considerations to keep in mind is hardware and firmware compatibility between Insight and Desigo. As a part of such a migration, you may be required to add some components to your system, and you'll certainly need to assess how your system is currently configured to determine the compatibility of such a migration from a hardware standpoint. So the Siemens architecture is set up using two communication protocols, what they refer to as BLN and FLN. That's building level network and floor level network. Building level network is also referred to as the P2 network, and floor level network is often referred to as the P1 network. The P2 network, or building level network, is capable of operating on two different modes of communication wiring, one being twisted pair 485 communication wiring, and the other being an Ethernet backbone. P2 devices that are on a twisted pair network will not be supported by Desigo. So this means that you will either have to add what they refer to as an AEM, which is essentially a Cat5 to 485 converter to host those legacy controllers. It depends on the vintage of your controllers. I believe it's the MECs and the MBCs do not support Cat5 on the controller or Ethernet on the controller. So as a result, you'll probably have to add that extra layer, the AEM. It's worth noting that is an additional point of failure. So that's something to certainly consider. I'm sure upgrading to the latest PXC hardware is an option that Siemens will certainly push. And that is a Cat5 that will operate on the Ethernet backbone that I mentioned. Something else to consider for your legacy controllers is the fact that the firmware may need to be upgraded, which could require you to have to pay for the firmware and also pay for the migration to that firmware platform, the labor associated with migrating to that firmware. And the firmware is basically the software for the the field controller. So think of it as essentially your cell phone, the operating system on your cell phone. It's the software that runs on a piece of hardware. For those of you that operate in commercial real estate, probably very familiar with tenant override systems. These are systems where tenants log in, schedule overtime, HVAC or lighting services, and typically platforms that offer this have a billing built in based on the rate and the consumption. You bill back your tenants for that consumption. This is something that exists within Insight, however, is not supported in Desigo. So if you have an Insight system and you are currently offering that as a service in your building, you'll have to find an alternative solution. Computrols does have a web-based tenant overtime system that is both compatible with our building automation system and third-party competitors. It's able to integrate with any building automation system available in the market. So if you find yourself in such a situation where you're migrating from Insight to Desigo, you need a tenant override system solution, that is something that we offer. One of the key takeaways with that is the fact that we offer that as a one-time buy, whereas many others on the market offer that as software as a service. So something certainly to keep in mind. Lastly, Insight does not support, Desigo does not support BACnet server. For those of you not familiar with BACnet server is a communication protocol, means of essentially two machines or two systems communicating amongst one another. So let's take, for instance, you might have Siemens Insight for your HVAC controls, but for your lighting in your property, you use Lutron or Square D or some other system for lighting. One of the ways in which you can have the features of manipulating, turning on and off your lights through your HVAC control system is the communication protocol BACnet server. Desigo, as I understand it, does not support BACnet server, and as a result, if you operating on Insight looking to migrate to Desigo, that is something that you will lose as a part of that migration, and you, Siemens, and whoever the third party is that's providing the other end will need to collaborate and come up with an alternative solution, and there may be fees with such a migration because you're changing programming that already exists and making it work another way if another means is actually possible. So as a part of the migration, in addition to the steep learning curve and the loss of some features, there's certainly a lot of costs associated with migrating to the new platform. It's worth noting that a lot of the costs that you'll incur are things that you've already paid for, the setup and the configuration of the programming. When you migrate over from Insight to Desigo, while some of the database is automatically transitioned, there are a lot of things that do not migrate over and have to be manually done. There's going to be a lot of labor associated with getting this configuration set up. Some of those may include renaming points. You'll have to reconfigure trends and reports that you have customized. As I mentioned, there may be firmware upgrades. There's certainly going to be expenses associated with training on this new platform. So don't expect this to be a cheap migration. Key takeaways as a part of the migration from Insight to Desigo is it's going to be a major transition. There's going to be cost, could be very significant costs associated with migration. But I think the most important takeaway is the fact that don't expect this to be the last time. I believe the Insight platform was around 20 plus years. So I'm not saying that you can expect anytime in the near future for Siemens to migrate to a new software platform. However, expect something next. Perhaps it's the field hardware is going to now need to be transitioned in a matter of years. I've detailed to you literature that was posted on their website that's readily available. I would educate yourselves, ask these questions to them. When is my hardware no longer going to be supported? What is the life cycle of that hardware? What do you have in the pipeline in terms of new products? How long are those products going to be supported? Can I get that map that was detailed for Insight and Desigo? Can I get that for the other hardware and the items that I've invested at my property, so that I have a clear understanding of what to expect moving forward and can plan accordingly? Enough about Siemens. I want to get into Computrols and what really differentiates us in a crowded marketplace. And I believe our key differentiators are a direct result of the things that we believe in. Put a slide up here showcasing our core values, which are service, simplicity, quality, and camaraderie. These are the things that we believe in at Computrols. And as a byproduct of our beliefs come our business practices. We're proud to say that in our 30-plus years of doing business, we've never obsoleted a product. In fact, we build backwards and forwards compatibility in everything that we make, and we believe in the products, the quality of our products, so much so that we offer the industry's lifetime warranty on everything that we manufacture. In addition to that, we believe in empowering the end user. We believe in not taking prisoners, rather creating partners with our customers. So as a result of that, we build the most intuitive user interface. We want to empower the end user to manipulate and maintain their building automation system to whatever level they feel comfortable with. That's just a byproduct, again, of what we believe in as a company. I mentioned for 30-plus years, we've never obsoleted a product, and I wanted to take a deeper dive into how exactly we do that. So in the center of this slide here, you'll see just a dumb terminal board, what we refer to as a backplane. This is where all the wires land for our controllers. And on the left and right side, you'll see, on the left, you'll see a white control board, and the right, you'll see a black control board. These represent what we refer to as a brain board. So two-piece board design consisting of a brain board and a backplane. The board on the left is a product that we've been manufacturing for between 15 and 20 years now. That is that is a 32X controller that is a part of our X line family, and the one on the right is the latest product of Computrols, a 32LX, which is a part of the LX family. The LX is a drop-in replacement for the X controller. And the takeaway here is, as a company, we build new products. As technology evolves, we'll build new products, but it's always going to be in the same form factor so that our customers are able to leverage their existing infrastructure. If they choose to migrate to the latest and greatest technology, we'll offer a buyback on the legacy equipment and provide a drop-in replacement so that their investment is continuously leveraged throughout the life cycle of owning that building automation hardware. Talk briefly about our core competency, and a large part of this today's webinar is our ability to integrate to both proprietary and non-proprietary building automation systems or communication protocols. It's important to understand Computrols' evolution as a company. We started in service, evolved into integration, and then today we offer turnkey solutions through our ability to manufacture these systems as well. But going back to our roots as a service company, a company was established in 1983 by a gentleman named Roy Lynch. And at that point in time, he was simply servicing third-party building automation systems. His business was quick to grow due to the quality service that he provided, and reached a point where he brought on his brother Kevin to help with the demand that they were receiving as a part of servicing those third-party systems. It was during that time that they were servicing these systems that they recognized that there had to be a better way. And it's important to understand that building automation systems at that time were extremely complicated. It required a trained technician to do absolutely anything. And Roy and Kevin just said, I think that we can do this better. And one day they had their aha moment. They said, what if we had a head-end PC that ran a software that was so intuitive that it allowed the end user to manipulate and maintain their building automation system in-house, but was powerful enough to communicate with the existing field controllers that were deployed in the field. Roy and Kevin didn't have a background in computer science, so they went to the University of New Orleans, where they found our now third owner, Mike Donellan, who serves as our Director of Research and Development. And Mike was able to bring Roy and Kevin's vision to fruition and created our very first integrated solution. That integrated solution was integration to a Honeywell Delta 1000 building automation system, which was probably the most commonplace system of its time. And from there, our integration solutions quickly evolved. Today, our integrated solutions encompass everything that you see on this screen and many more communication protocols and systems that we integrate with. Now let's take a deeper dive into Computrols' specific integration to Siemens. I mentioned earlier in today's webinar that the Siemens architecture is made up of both communication protocols, the BLN network and the FLN network, or as they refer to it, P2 and P1 on occasion. It's important to understand that unlike other integrators in the marketplace, Computrols takes a completely different approach. Rather than building translators that translate communications or messages between equipment, we actually reverse engineer our competitors' proprietary communication protocols and embed those languages onto our hardware. And that's a major distinguishing factor because it gives us true control of the hardware that is existing. To give you an example of this in action is, let's say, for instance, you have a trunk of Siemens, FLN, TEC, terminal equipment controllers they're Siemens version of the VAV deployed at your site, when Computrols comes in and integrates. Well, we would put in one of our control boards to host that FLN communication channel, and it would host and communicate and do everything that's needed for that channel of VAV controllers. And then one day down the line, one of those VAV controllers fails. At that point, and this is an important takeaway for any time that you do any sort of integrated solution, is you need to have an understanding of what the integration solution looks like on day one when you integrate, but also what does the migration path forward look like. That's a question that many people cannot answer when it comes to integration. So to get back to my example, you have the trunk of FLN communicating VAV controllers, and one day one of those VAV controllers on that communication trunk fails. At that point, you have two options. You can call Siemens and ask them to purchase one of their FLN VAV controllers as a direct replacement for that, or you can have you can purchase one of Computrols' VAV controllers that communicates FLN natively. It drops in on the same communication line, and it comes with the industry's only lifetime warranty as a part of our belief in quality. So that's a solid example of how we natively support the proprietary communication protocols of our competitors. One of the other key takeaways is the visibility that you'll gain as a part of an integrated solution with Computrols. So one thing that I did not mention earlier in this presentation is the fact that one of the things that is unique about Computrols is we store histories on all points all the time from system inception. And as a result of that, you get visibility into your building automation system that you've never had before. We also open up different views to where you can see all points, look back at that history. You're not shoehorned into a single view within the platform. So that visibility is really important. Also, one of the takeaways from Computrols' integrated solution is it offers you a very viable alternative to the rip and replace option. So certainly something to take into consideration. And I think the biggest takeaway is it's a pathway out of that product churning, planned obsolescence life cycle that we have mentioned in detail today. I'm going to get into two brief case studies, and then we'll wrap this up for Q&A. Again, appreciate your time and participation in today's webinar. First, we have Williams Tower, which is a high-rise office tower in the Galleria district of Houston, Texas, 64-story office tower. If any of you have ever been to Houston at night, it's the only building in the Galleria district. It's very noticeable. And in the evenings, there's a beacon that circles around the top of the building that you could see for miles and miles away. So, pretty notable property. Computrols first integrated with the Siemens system at this property, I believe it was 8 years ago. And we were called in due to the system. They weren't able to get visibility out of the system. They weren't able to manipulate and maintain and have the level of control that they wanted of their automation system at this property. So Computrols was tasked with coming in and providing an integrated solution. Shortly after we provided the integrated solution, the customer was so satisfied with the results, they wanted to begin ripping and replacing some of the legacy pneumatic controls and replacing it with Computrols field hardware. This project has been a phased project that initiated as a part of the integration. At the end of this year, we'll complete a retrofit of everything in that property, be 100% Computrols at this point, due to the visibility and the flexibility that they received as a part of that initial integration. They were motivated to migrate and get this building to be much more energy efficient, reduce the hot and cold calls, and they eliminated a service contract as well, because the operators at this particular property manipulate and maintain the building automation system in-house. They contact Computrols tech support if they ever run into issues, which is free of charge to any of our customers. In the event that they need a technician, they simply contact our local branch manager for a service call. So great success for both Computrols and the property management company there. Next case study is 4000 MacArthur, which is a two-building campus in Newport Beach, California, 2 10-story office towers. This project is one that we completed, I believe, 4 years ago. We came in and we integrated to the Siemens building automation system in that property. One of the complaints or comments of the chief engineer at this property was the fact that he stated it was like we were driving blind. We had no idea. What we were able to uncover as a part of our integrated solution at this property is the fact that while these are identical buildings, their sequence of operations have to be completely different due to the way that they run, the way that the sun hits the buildings during different parts of the day. We came in, we retro-commissioned the building, created a completely new sequence of operations that were independent for both buildings. While they were identical mechanically, the way that we operate them is completely different. And as a result of both that integration, eliminating the large Siemens maintenance contract, and the energy savings, we were able to get a return on investment for this customer in less than 3 months. So very impressive case study for us. Additional details on this case study and the Williams Tower case study can be found on our website. And as Scott mentioned, he'll be sending out an email with this slide deck as well.
Just want to let you all know that we do have regular webinars. If you'd like to keep up with Computrols content, I would recommend going to Computrols.com and signing up for our newsletter. We appreciate you all joining us for the webinar today. If you want to know more about our Siemens integration, we have our contact information here. You can fill out a form on our website. You can call us at 504-529-1413, and we can give you a better idea also of what this looks like from a software perspective. Show you just how smooth this integration is when it comes to viewing your system in Computrols building automation software. Once again, we appreciate you all taking the time for the webinar today. We're running right into our 35-minute window here. Like I said, you have our email address here, info@computrols.com, if you have any further questions. We appreciate you attending the webinar and hope to see you at our future webinars as well. Take care.